we're covering the MLSA just because the recording didn't start. It was my fault. Anyways, what information is provided to the MLS after sale? This is a good question because I actually had a couple questions regarding this week, but all the terms of the transaction, the sales price, financing, and concessions are all provided to the MLS in which the property is located after the close of escrow. Okay. And potentially, if this MLSA is consenting to allowing us to send over a copy of the listing agreement to the MLS if they ask for it, basically. Okay. Broker belongs to the multiple listing service below. Okay. So it's just outlining this and then talking about like, what is broker's MLS? Is it the primary or not the primary? So this one's kind of interesting. I would imagine at some point, maybe they're going to move this to a grid format too, because there's lots of questions in here at the end. And then all these paragraphs at the beginning all reference the questions at the end, where when you look at our listing agreement, you look at our residential purchase agreement, you look at our buyer representation agreement, they always put like the questions first. We answer those questions and then we reference the paragraphs. So it'd be interesting to see if this one stays like it is or they change it around. But anyways, so first is just outlining what a multiple listing service is, what's provided to the MLS, and then what is our MLS. It's just outlining the definitions of that. The benefits of is section 2 of using an MLS and the impact of opting out. So here it just outlines to your clients like, hey, if you're worried about your address being posted out there or whatever, here's the benefits of an MLS. It gets all the information gets disseminated out. If we don't put it in the MLS, then I'm required to only market it to my office. Like I can't put it online. I can't put a sign in the yard, right? So it's just outlining all of that here. And also talking about the local MLS. So if you're going to list a property where you don't have the primary MLS, like if you were going to list up in, I don't know, Northern California, where they have their own MLS, it doesn't tie into, it's too far north for Metro list, then it talks about here, like that wouldn't be a local one where the property is located, which may limit exposure. Okay, so that's 2 is benefits of and the impact of opting out. These are all really important things to know where to find this information in case your sellers are considering not listing in the MLS or are wondering, what is the MLS? What's the benefits of it? It outlines all that for you. Now, paragraph 3 is public and private marketing of property in the clear cooperation policy. Now, I will say Barry's MLS does not adhere to the clear cooperation policy, which I have some new thoughts on that recently as I've been mulling this over, but we'll talk about those here in a minute. Anything outside of, we'll just capture anything outside of Barry's. Okay, so Metro list, right? So Barry's covers, only because that's our main service area, Sonoma, Napa, Solano, and Mendocino counties. Okay. I feel like I'm missing one. Solano, Sonoma, Napa, Marin, and Mendocino. Marin's in there too. That's part of our Barry's service area. That's our primary service area. So if it falls in one of those 5 counties, then we don't adhere to the clear cooperation policy as an MLS. Okay, that's the key term there, as an MLS. If it's outside of there, if the property is in Sacramento County, Placer County, Yolo County, right? The Bay Areas, they all adhere to the clear cooperation policy. And the clear cooperation policy states that because we're a member of the National Association of Realtors, that within 24 hours, 1 day of marketing to the public, the property, that it needs to be in the MLS and available to other users. Okay, so that means if I've put a sign in the yard, I'm marketing to the public. If I've talked about it with another agent that's outside of our office, I'm marketing it to the public. If I am sending it out in social media land, I'm marketing to the public. If I am sending out mailers to the neighbors around it, public marketing. Okay. So our clear cooperation policy says that, hey, within 24 hours of one of those things happening, it needs to be in the MLS and available for viewings. Um, Metro List is really strict about this. Okay. So hear me on this. Now we can exempt it from the MLS. So we can get this listing agreement signed. We can exempt it from public marketing for a period of time. That means you cannot public market it. We can't put signs in the yard. We can't put it on social media. Yeah. So those things, right? We can't market them. So these would be pocket listings. Ultimately, Amanda, to answer your questions, yes. So anything that is exempt that we're not going to put in the MLS is a pocket listing which we cannot market to the public. Okay, we can market it to our own clients. What we can do with those. So again, we can't put a sign in the yard, we can't send out mailers, we can't put it on social media. That's public marketing. It needs to be active in the MLS. Metro List especially, it needs to be ready to show. Okay, you have to be able to schedule a showing to it for it to be publicly marketed. Okay. Pocket listings are the other options. They're exempt. We aren't putting those in the MLS. The only people that we can market pocket listings to are other agents inside of our own office, our own brokerage, because ultimately listing agreements with the broker. So anybody within our brokerage and their specific clients and customers. So I can send out an email to my database about a listing that's not yet on the market. Amanda or Tabitha could I could say, hey, I've got this property coming on the market. And because you guys are part of my brokerage, you guys can also share that with your own special clients. You cannot post about it on social media. You can't put a sign in the yard. You can't send out mailings. So that's the rule about pocket listings. And Section 3 outlines that. Now, 3E, if it's in the Barry service area, those 5 counties, we can check the box. Clear cooperation policy does not apply. The MLS used by the broker to market the property does not have a clear cooperation policy to applies to the property. Broker shall disclose to seller and obtain seller's consent for any instruction not to market the property to the MLS or the public. So Barry's doesn't. So we can check this box. Now here's my issue, which means that Barry's allows us, like we can put a sign in the yard, a coming soon sign. We can talk about it on social media before it's in the MLS. Okay, and we can put it in the MLS as a coming soon. Okay, so we can do that and put it out there as coming soon. It doesn't have to be ready to scene, where we don't have coming soon listings in like the Metro List service area, which is the greater Sacramento area. It's a huge area. There are no coming soons. Okay, so here's my issue. We all belong to the National Association of Realtors, which means that part of what we've agreed to is the clear cooperation policy. So if we're publicly marketing the property, it should be in the MLS as a coming soon. Okay, I'm just throwing that out there. We've run with this. The Barry's doesn't adhere to the clear cooperation policy. We don't have to put it in the MLS. We can market it as a coming soon. We're good to do that, which we are based on our MLS. But ultimately, based on our relationship with the National Association of Realtors, we're not. So I'm just throwing that out there as something to think about. This is what I've been mulling over for the last couple of weeks, which is why it was funny that we had the listing agreement signing or training on Tuesday, and then Amanda wanted to talk more about the MLSA today. Okay, but we can still check this box here that it doesn't apply. Now, we'll talk about here in a minute what we have the ability to do, because this form is longer, so just hold on to that thought for a minute. Property listing information on the internet is Section 4. They can opt out of some of these features, so they could opt out of being in the internet at all, okay? Or they can limit it. We can limit the property address. We can limit features. We can limit like comments and reviews and automated estimate of value. Now, keep in mind that if we limit the address, okay, what happens is the property no longer shows up on mapped searches. So if I go to one of the big name searches, like my clients are going to go to or home buyers go to look for a property, and they do the map search, which a lot of people now are doing a map search, right? They're like, hey, I'm here. What's for sale around me? If you opt out of the property address being displayed in full on the internet, which is one of the options, that property is not going to show up on those map searches. Okay, so I'm just throwing that out there. So just be aware of that. Features, you can check, the MLS gives us options where we can limit the ability for like comments and reviews or an automated estimate of value, right? Um, but we don't necessarily have full control over that as well. So we can let sellers know that, yeah, we can mark that we don't want people to, but we can't control everything that's out there on the internet and what other websites allow it to do. We can just control what our MLS allows it to do. So there's not really any control there. The only thing we really truly have control over is that property address being shown or not shown. And if it's not shown, it won't be on a map search. Okay, so that's section 4. Talks about exposure. 5 is the marketing options. So this is where that clear cooperation policy comes back into play. Okay. Option 5A is full exposure. I've got a signed listing agreement. It's got to go in the MLS. I think it's like our standard is within 3 days after a signed listing agreement, and needs to be ready to be marketed to the public. Okay. And full exposure on that. And within 24 hours of marketing to the public is based on the clear cooperation policy. So just heads up on that. It's going to get pushed out on the IDXs. This is full exposure, right? Like we've got the property in the MLS. It's going everywhere. We're ready to sell this property. For most of us, we're not signing a listing agreement and ready to market a property within 3 days. Okay. So for most of us, we're going to have delayed marketing on this property. So we're going to opt out for a certain period of time, which makes it that pocket listing that can only be shared with our office and our clients of ourselves and other agents in our office. Okay, so A is full exposure. B is delayed marketing, limited exposure. Okay, this is something that happened last summer, that NAR released another option, because it used to be either like it was on the market or it wasn't on the market. Okay, but now they've introduced some gray area. So our delayed marketing, limited exposure, the property is submitted to the MLS and it will be available to other members who may engage in one-to-one promotion with their existing or past clients, but other than specified in 4, may not mass market the property to current, past, or prospective clients. Okay. Information about the property will not be syndicated to third-party websites, right? We're not pushing it out there. We're not putting it in the MLS to have the information disseminated out to everybody. I don't know if Barry's or Metro List or Bay Area or Contra Costa or San Francisco, if any of those MLSs have a system to handle this yet. They were supposed to have a system in place to handle this where we could say, hey, we've got this listing. The seller has instructed us that we want delayed marketing, limited exposure, and I'm giving it to you, which goes into like a database that other agents could look at, but it's not actually getting pushed out to the masses. I don't know if our MLSs have a way to handle that. I haven't asked them yet because this really just came up this last week. Okay, so it's not going to go out to all the websites. So that's delayed marketing, limited exposure. It allows us to market to the public, but not in a mass marketing way. The C is coming soon or equivalent, right? So like Barry's has coming soon listing. So putting it into the MLS as coming soon fulfills our obligation to that clear cooperation policy underneath the umbrella of the National Association of Realtors. Okay, so we put this property as coming soon in the MLS. Even if we pushing that coming soon date out there, we've adhered to the clear cooperation, even though Barry's doesn't. Barry's allows coming soon so that us as realtors can stay compliant with the National Association of Realtors underneath the umbrella of Barry's. Okay, I'm just throwing that out there. Office exclusive or limited exposure. Property will not be submitted to the MLS for display during the entire listing period or another time specified by the seller. The seller's brokerage may engage in one-on-one promotion between licensee or license period, or sorry, license working through the broker and their clients. Okay. If allowed by MLS under NAR guidance. Other members who have received direct one-to-one promotion from a licensee with the listing brokerage firm may engage in one-on-one promotion with their clients, but may not mass market the property to current, past, or prospective clients. Okay. Whew. So that's usually what we do. Usually we get a listing agreement signed. We mark it as excluded from the MLS. There's a little form that gets filled out. And on the MLS, we register it with the MLS that it's not coming on the market yet. Okay. So that's our office exclusive or limited exposure. And then days on market just talks about how days on market is calculated. Okay. This comes back because we actually have to make a choice on this later on. So this is where it doesn't make sense that we don't make our choices throughout or at the beginning. We make them at the end. Photographs. Okay. Just saying that, hey, photographs, people may photograph the property when they come to visit it. We can ask them not to, but we can't actually control that. So here we have 6. Okay, so you have all of those items. That's kind of all the definitions. That's what we're going to fill out in the last section. Here in the last section, now we've got this last section. These are seller's instructions to broker. So this fulfills the written instructions to broker section. And it starts with 1, property listing information on the internet. Okay, and it's saying, hey, see paragraph 4 above for information. Is it total internet opt-out? Is it a limited opt-out? Are we opting out of specific features? Okay, so this is when your property is marketed to the public, are we putting it out there on the internet? Most of the time, we're going to say, hey, yeah, we're not going to check anything here. Okay, it's not going to be a total or a limited opt-out. Most of the time, we just leave this blank, meaning that, yep, we're marketing it on the internet. Okay. So this is where no checkbox is good. Marketing option number 2. Okay. Here's the marketing option selected below shall start at the beginning of the listing period or on specific day. Okay. So this is where we have options. The default is full exposure. So the default is, hey, at the beginning of the listing period, whatever that date is that's on the residential listing agreement, we're going to have full exposure of that property, marketing it to the public. Okay, which means that within 24 hours, it needs to be in the MLS for public marketing. Delayed marketing. Limited exposure is our B. It's or B. Okay, that's if allowed by the MLS. That's where, hey, market the property as a delayed market, limited exposure. Seller understands that even though the property would be submitted to the MLS, the property's data will not be syndicated to third-party websites nor be exposed through other member IDX websites. The property will be available for others to see, tour, and inform their clients. So, hey, delayed marketing. Yeah, people, I'll schedule you a showing to it, but we're not pushing it out on the MLS or all the other big name websites. Okay. C is coming soon if allowed by the MLS. Again, Barry's allows this. So this is, hey, we're going to market it under the coming soon. We've explained the parameters of coming soon and the impact it may have on marketing of the seller's property. We're not quite ready to come on the market, so we're going to market it as coming soon. That way we can talk about it. We don't have to worry about sharing it to the public. It's on there and it's just not ready to be seen yet. Maybe we're finishing up projects. Or D is office exclusive limited exposure. Okay, this means that, hey, it's not being submitted to the MLS. There's not going to be public marketing of it. We're just talking about it inside of our own specific office and to our own clients. Okay, so there is that information, and we can check that. I feel like this down here, well, okay, so under office exclusive, that's why. Under office exclusive, so most of the time we get a listing agreement signed, not ready to go on the market yet. We're not sure when it's going to be ready. We're going to check the box for office exclusive limited exposure. We're not marketing it to the masses until down here. So D here, this option has two other options with it. One is, hey, it's office exclusive limited exposure, and we're never marketing this to the public. Okay, that would be D1. Unless we instruct otherwise, which would be done. You can always change it with a modification of terms. D2 is, hey, it's an office exclusive limited exposure listing until this date. So if we know that, hey, we're signing the listing agreement today, it's the 6th of March, we're going to go on the market in a month on the 6th of April, we could fill out, hey, yep, it's going to be office exclusive until April 6th. And then it's going to go public marketing. Okay. Now with any of these options, just know that you can change it at any time. We can readjust that coming soon date when it actually hits the market. So we can change anything there. Okay. So this is, oh, did you have a question?
Yeah, what's the difference between 2B and 2D?
Yeah. So 2B is that, hey, we're submitting it to the MLS. We can talk about it with other agents. And this is, I have to check with Barry still. This is going to be one of my questions to them is if they have this set up for this, but it's not actually going out to the public. Like it's not going out on the IDXs. It's not officially in the full ID or MLS feed, but it's still available for showings. So this is like, limited coming soon in a different way. Where normally coming soon is no, we're not doing showings until it's officially on the market. We're just getting it ready. We just wanted to let you know it was coming. Where delayed marketing is, hey, we have a property that's for sale and I'm ready. I'm willing to show it to people, but I'm not quite ready for it to be mass marketed to everybody in the world. I don't want it sent out on the IDX feeds. I don't want it to show up on other IDX websites. That would be your delayed marketing limited exposure. So that's kind of the difference. Whereas, and then office exclusive, your D would be I'm only allowed to share it to my office. It can't go outside the office. I can't send out flyers. I can't put it on social media. I can't put a sign in the yard. That would be your office exclusive limited exposure. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's that section. So you want to pick the marketing option. For the most part, it's going to be, hey, we're going to start this on the listing period, and then we're doing office exclusive, or hey, we're starting on the listing period. This is what we're going to do. And then if we select D, we need to begin marketing at what date? If you're going to change it. And again, if we went with office exclusive and left D here with no date, because we weren't sure when it was going to be ready to go on the market, and we just said, hey, during the entire listing period, we're not marketing it to the public. All we have to do is do a modification of terms of we're going to begin listing or marketing this property to the public on this date is the on market date. So if you don't know when it's coming on the market yet, that might be your best option. All right. Other instructions are down here. Seller photograph instructions. So remember we had that question up there of seller instructs broker to publish in the MLS that taking of images is limited to those persons preparing it, right? We can do our photos, but they don't want other people taking photos. And again, we read up in that other paragraph that we don't have control over what people do when they walk through their house. We can ask them to not take photos, but they still may do it anyways. So that's that section there. And then any other instructions or terms would be here. And then everybody signs that MLS addendum. Questions on that MLS addendum? All right. Previously, NAR had a standpoint on it of either it's marketed to the public or it's not marketed to the public. It's either you can push it out to other people, agents talk about it, and it's in the MLS within 24 hours of that taking place or within the next day of that taking place, or We're not marketing it to the public. We're just keeping it inside of our office. Those were our two options. They've accounted for on our car forms the coming soon option, which takes care of the public marketing side of it as far as NAR is concerned, and they've given us this limited exposure office or the delayed marketing limited exposure. So there's a couple other options now available to us where we still adhere to that National Association of Realtors clear cooperation policy. Um, but we're bending the rules just a little bit. They've allowed for some rule bending. So that's
I
my
have a,
main takeaway on this form.
I have a
Yes.
question about marking the box of the clear cooperation.
Yeah.
I, I was under the impression it's just stating that the MLS does not clearly cooperate.
Correct. That is what it says. So anytime it's going to be in the bear service of the berries service area, we can check that box. But as agents, that's where we've kind of run with the clear cooperation doesn't apply in berries, so it doesn't apply to us either. So I'm just saying you may want to have a check about that only because we do belong to the Association of Realtors. And so we still fall underneath the clear cooperation policy.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I just feel like there's some gray area there. And we've always kind of run with this. Well, in berries, it doesn't matter. We can do whatever we want. It doesn't have to be in the MLS. And because the clear cooperation policy doesn't apply, but ultimately it still does apply to us as realtors, even though it doesn't apply to berries as an MLS. So I don't know how you want to work that out with yourself, but I'm just throwing that out there. I'm going to get some more details on it.
I've
Did
not seen it be too much of a benefit for our sellers to not clearly cooperate.
Yes. However, there might be times like you've got a home that's ready to go on the market or not ready to go on the market yet because the seller's doing some renovations, so it's not ready to be in the MLS and shown and all of that. So in the past we would always do, we would opt out and just do it as a pocket listing or a, office listing, ultimately, office exclusive. But that means that when we're having a conversation with that other client or other agent that walks through our open house and they're like, man, I sure wish there was another 4-bedroom home with a swimming pool. And now you tell that agent, oh, I've got one. It's not on the market yet. We've now began marketing to the public under the guidelines of that because now we've taken it outside of our office and we've shared it with somebody else, which now becomes a, a violation of the NAR clear cooperation policy. So that's where I feel like we can get into trouble with it versus if we marked it as coming soon and had it in the MLS as coming soon, even though we weren't sure when it was actually going to come on the market, then we are okay talking about it with other agents and other people outside of our office. It just becomes this gray area
Mm-hmm.
when you don't have listings that are quite ready to be shown yet. And then there's the delayed marketing limited exposure, which this one, under the car forms, it clearly states here the property will be available for others to see, tour, and inform their clients. Um, it's not necessarily clients touring, so there's some gray there, but where you could have it like agents walking through, but it does allow you to have that conversation amongst other people as well, and then not have it as listed as a coming soon. And again, I'm not sure that Barry's has figured out a way to have those properties because the heart behind it on the National Association of Realtors thought process was that the MLS will have a database of off-market properties um, that people can inquire about and that aren't being syndicated out to all the sites and available to see yet. So, and I'm not sure that any of the MLSs have figured out how to wrap their brains around that or provide that as an option for off market listings. So, anyways, that's your MLSA form that's coupled up with your residential listing agreement. So for people who have been in the business for a long time and are looking for some of those options, there you find them down here now instead of in the actual listing agreement where they all used to be part of the listing agreement. So your opt-out and such.
I would like to see this in a grid form like you were saying.
Yeah, it seems weird to me that they put
It's
all the
old school.
questions at the end.
Yeah, that's how they used to be.
Yeah. Seems like it should have a small grid at the top. Here's what I'd like to select, and here's all the information pertaining to those, like everything else, so that it was all consistent. But, again, I don't help create these forms. Maybe I should figure out how to get on that committee. Um,
When you learn, let me know.
I'll let you know.
I'm ready to rally.
Your broker compensation advisory, right? Also attached to your listing agreement. Make sure you read through that and know how to explain it. There's kind of a seller portion and a buyer portion of that, right? When sellers list their properties for sale, they're paying the seller's broker. It's fully negotiable. Optional compensation. We talked about this on Tuesday. There's a box on the listing agreement. Up here in the grid. Oops, right there. Where it talks about here's where you put in the normal compensation, but then there's also this C2 box of additional compensation if to seller's broker if buyer is unrepresented. Okay, not saying that, hey, we're going to dual represent them and now I'm going to start representing them in an agent duty. This is, hey, as a buyer, the buyer doesn't want to be represented. They're unrepresented. You can write in an additional portion of compensation to be included if that happens, because ultimately, you're going to be doing more work on behalf of that buyer if they don't have an agent, because who's going to open the door for them and their inspections, and who's going to make sure they have all the correct forms and all these different things. So just know that that's in there. And then it talks about that in the broker compensation advisory here on 1B, right? A listing agreement may include optional additional compensation amounts owed to the seller's broker for situations where the broker takes on additional responsibilities or workload. Sometimes a buyer may not be working, nor want to be represented by a real estate broker. When that happens, the seller's broker is not required to represent the buyer. The seller and seller's broker may decide that they do not want to create such relationship. In those situations, the seller's broker is advised to use a buyer non-agency form to inform the buyer that the seller's broker will be acting on behalf of the seller only, not act as the buyer's agent through the transaction. However, because the buyer is unrepresented, the seller's agent will inevitably have to do more work to facilitate the transaction. A seller may agree to compensate their broker for the additional work in these cases. So that's in that box up there on the listing agreement. Broker may represent both buyer and seller in dual agency. I don't recommend this. Keep in mind, dual agency is anyone under our brokerage. So I do recommend that. I have no issue with Amanda has a listing, I'm going to write on it, or I have a listing and Amanda's going to write an offer on my listing for her client. That is dual agency, but there's that degree of separation. Ultimately, Amanda's looking out for the best interest of her clients, and I'm looking out for the best interest of my clients. I have an issue with I have an open house. Buyer comes in on my listing, wants to write an offer, wants to hire me as their agent. I'm going to refer them to another agent only because there's so much gray area that happens. My job is to look out for the best interest of my clients and how do I protect my sellers and look to get the most amount of money for them when my goal for the buyer is to get that house for the least amount of money. And how do I separate that and negotiate? There's just so much gray area. I would guess, I haven't looked at the stats on this, but there's probably more legal issues that arise with dual agency than there are with single agency when it's within just the same agent, not talking about the brokerage as a whole. So that's my personal thoughts and feelings on that. I think you're going to run into trouble. And most of the calls that I get of people like, how do I handle this situation, are those that like, and I don't know really how to advise them because it's so tricky, is that dual agency where you're representing both buyer and seller in the same transaction. I don't recommend it. We can, but I don't recommend it. So that's kind of the seller portion. The buyer portion is section number 2, right? Buyer representation. Compensation is fully negotiable. There's a requirement for written agreements. The advantages of written agreements. So if you need to know how to explain your BRBC, right here. Requirement for written agreements pursuant to the nationwide class action settlement reached by the NAR. Participants in the multiple listing service are required to have a written agreement with a buyer prior to showing a buyer a residential property or giving buyer a tour of such property. The agreement must identify the amount of compensation to be paid for the services provided and require that the broker cannot receive any compensation in excess of that amount. Pursuant to January 1st, 2025, new law in California, all licensees must have a buyer representation agreement as soon as practical upon acting as the buyer's agent, and it must include the amount of compensation services rendered when compensation is due in the contract termination, which may not exceed 3 months. So, right, so it tells us right there. So we can have this form with us in fact, it's attached to our BRBC. If you've got questions, you've got clients saying, why do I have to sign this? We just open up this form right here, and 2B outlines, here's the requirement for written agreements, and here's why you have to sign that. We can also,
I have
yep,
another question.
yeah,
It almost, because I'm still another car petition question I have for them is the under our compensation, the compensation owed to unrepresented buyers.
uh-huh.
So I would think an objection from a seller would be like, why would I pay you and then pay another compensation for a buyer to then not have representation? It's almost as the buyer is exempting themselves from obligation to pay for representation. It's falling back on the seller if the buyer chooses to not be represented.
Well, I mean, the buyer's taking on that liability themselves of then representing themselves in the transaction. So that's a whole conversation you can have about why most buyers are represented. But we do have occasions where we might have somebody, we see this a lot. Most of the time it comes into play with like investors. You have an investor that wants to come in and write their own offer, which then is on a random purchase agreement, which then we have to review with our brokerage. And so there's actual extra work involved for a buyer that's not represented that I'm going to do on your behalf to help you get your house sold and protect you in the sale of your home against somebody who is not represented, who's not using the regular forms and being advised appropriately to make sure that we're protecting you and your interests so that they don't come back with a lawsuit, right?
That's a good
Like,
explanation.
so
Yeah.
it's all in how you explain it.
Hmm.
And right, we're talking about the benefits to the seller of like, my job is to protect you, and it's gonna take more of my time to protect you against somebody who's not represented than somebody who's represented.
Hmm.
Does
Thank
that
you.
make sense?
Hmm.
Okay. Um, Advantages of a written agreement. Not only are we required to have it, but here's the advantages, right? It outlines the terms of our relationship and our duties. It establishes clear mutual expectations to help avoid misunderstandings over whose duty is what, and outlines the amount of compensation to be covered. Right? So that section 2 is the buyer section. So 1 is for sellers, 2 is for buyers. 3 is, hey, when we enlist the help of a real estate broker to represent them, buyers agree to pay for their buyer's broker when escrow closes. But the person responsible for payment may be negotiated as part of the transaction, right? This is the third part to it. So this is really important to cover as well with our sellers so that we can have this conversation of, are you willing to? And we can have our conversation with our buyers of, hey, we're saying that this is what's due, but oftentimes this is taken care of by the sellers. Here's how the compensation can get taken, right? Buyer pays compensation pursuant to the agreement is option A. The seller pays compensation, right? The seller negotiates for seller to compensate buyer's broker as part of the offer. Or buyer's agent negotiates an agreement directly with seller. Okay. Buyer negotiates for seller to compensate buyers. For the most part, it's buyer's agent negotiates with the other agent for that, but it's just worded weird. Buyer's broker is not permitted to receive compensation for services from whatever source that is greater than the amount in the BRBC. So just know that that's the max, whatever you've written in that form. Changing practices related to seller's broker. Historically, in California, many sellers brokers use multiple listing service to make a unilateral offer of compensation to buyer's broker who procured a buyer for the sale of the property, right? How it used to be. However, the NAR settlement prohibits the seller's broker from using the MLS to make an offer of compensation. So our listing agreement forms no longer provide for such offers of compensation. Um, and we don't have a form that facilitates that. Buyers and sellers must separately negotiate compensation with respective brokers as specified above. So just kind of outlines that in your broker compensation advisory. All right. Those are kind of the tricky forms. Then you get your PRBS and your fair housing and your all that. But any other questions related to this form or anything else as far as the residential listing agreement?
I probably have a stupid question, but the Consumer and Privacy Act disclosure, how does that pertain to sellers?
It doesn't.
But it's
Um,
on there.
it
So they
is.
all go, what is, you know what I mean? And I'm like,
It
well,
is because California law requires us to share with you the California Consumer Privacy Act. We're required to share that with you. Um, and because as a California resident, you have certain rights, but ultimately we can't, and we don't control what information is disseminated after the close of escrow. I mean, that's ultimately what it is. Like we can remove photos from your listing, but we can't require all the other websites to take down that information. There's certain information that's public rights, just public knowledge, like the sales price and the close of escrow date. Those type of things just become public information. So we in our role, we're limited on what we can control and what we can't control. But it is in here. And if they want more information, they can go to org.ca.gov privacy.ccpa.
ooh, thank you.
Yeah. Because most of the stuff we handle it's public record, not non-public record.
People
So
just
yeah.
get scared. They
Yeah,
go,
during
I
the
don't
process of
know.
buying and selling real estate, your private information will be collected and likely shared with others, including real estate licensees, multiple listing service, real estate internet services, service providers, lenders, title and escrow companies, to name several possibilities. Businesses that are covered by the CCPA are required to grant you various rights in your private information, including the right to know what private information is collected. So, like, they sign a notice with the title company regarding this. They sign a notice with their lender regarding this.
Mm.
We just let them know that hey, we don't share any of your private information outside of what's public knowledge, outside of our escrow transaction. Like that's the easiest answer is we don't provide any information about your private information with any other services that you don't allow us to do so. We don't sell your information after the close of escrow, but there is some information that is just public information after the close of escrow takes place. Things like your sales price, your close of escrow date, the ownership of the property, and we can't control that. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other questions? My screen just went away. It closed. Poof. It took away my share. I guess I'm done. All right. Fabulous. Well, I hope you guys found this helpful. If you guys have any questions, holler at me. I do this car forms training the first Friday of every month at 11 o'clock. So I'll be back here in April. But if you have any questions before that, never hesitate to reach out. Or if you want me to cover a specific form, just feel free to shoot me over a message or a text or whatever ahead of time so that I can be prepared. But I'm always happy to cover whatever. So I will see you all next week.